My new boss told me my old company was a waste of time on my resume. He had no idea I was the one who sold it for 8 figures.
My new boss called my old company a waste of time on my resume. He had no idea I was the one who sold it for 8 figures. When I took the job at Camden Strategic, a mid-sized consulting firm known for its aggressive, credential-obsessed culture, I did it deliberately, quietly, and with a specific goal that had nothing to do with the salary listed on the offer letter. I wanted to learn a particular kind of enterprise consulting methodology the firm was known for, something I genuinely believed would sharpen skills I'd need for what came next in my career, even after everything I'd already built. My new manager, a sharp, ambitious man named Preston, reviewed my resume during our first one-on-one meeting with the specific, clinical thoroughness of someone who considered himself an excellent judge of talent. He moved quickly past my education, my references, until he landed on the 3-year gap where I'd founded and run a small logistics software company before joining his team. "This is interesting," he said, tapping the page with something between curiosity and mild dismissal. "A startup that folded. Honestly, between us, I'd consider leaving this off future resumes. It reads more like a waste of time than actual experience, especially compared to the caliber of work you'll be doing here." I didn't correct him in that meeting, partly because I was still new, still building credibility in a culture that valued a very specific, narrow definition of professional pedigree, and partly because the full story of what had actually happened to that folded startup felt like far too much to unpack in a first one-on-one with a manager who'd already decided, confidently, what my career history meant. The company Preston dismissed so casually was a logistics software platform I'd founded 5 years earlier, initially as a scrappy solution to a specific supply chain problem I'd encountered in an earlier job. I'd built it slowly, painfully, through 3 difficult funding rounds, countless near failures, and a level of stress that occasionally kept me awake calculating payroll at 3 in the morning. 2 years ago, after finally achieving genuine product-market fit and consistent revenue growth, the company was acquired by a much larger logistics conglomerate, in a deal that, after taxes, legal fees, and a mandatory 2-year employment transition period I'd just completed, left me in a financial position that made the salary at Camden Strategic almost comically unnecessary. I hadn't taken the Camden job for the money. I'd taken it because after 2 years locked into a corporate transition agreement following the acquisition, I genuinely missed the specific, hands-on strategic work Camden specialized in, and I wanted to learn from people who did it exceptionally well, even if it meant starting, on paper, as a mid-level associate rather than announcing my actual financial position to every new colleague I met. Preston, understandably, had no way of knowing any of this. LinkedIn, if he'd looked closely, would have shown the acquisition, but like most people scanning quickly through resumes during a first meeting, he'd seen founder, company dissolved and drawn the fastest, most convenient conclusion available to him. Over the following months, Preston continued, occasionally and always with a certain confident authority, to offer me unsolicited career advice, gently suggesting I focus on building a more traditional track record rather than dwelling on that startup thing. I let most of these comments pass without correction, partly out of genuine indifference to his opinion of my resume, and partly because correcting him felt, honestly, like more effort than the situation warranted. The moment that finally shifted things happened during a client pitch meeting, nearly 8 months into my time at Camden. We were preparing a proposal for a logistics client, and Preston, presenting our team's relevant experience to the partners reviewing the pitch, mentioned, almost as an aside, that our team unfortunately lacked direct founder-level experience in the specific logistics software space the client operated in, a gap he suggested we address by bringing in an outside advisor. I spoke up, calmly, for what I think was the first time in 8 months of quietly absorbing his assumptions. I mentioned that I had, in fact, founded and successfully exited a logistics software company operating in almost exactly that space, 2 years earlier, and that I'd be happy to lead that portion of the client presentation directly, given my direct experience. The moment that finally shifted things happened during a client pitch meeting, nearly 8 months into my time at Camden. We were preparing a proposal for a logistics client, and Preston, presenting our team's relevant experience to the partners reviewing the pitch, mentioned, almost as an aside, that our team unfortunately lacked direct founder-level experience in the specific logistics software space the client operated in, a gap he suggested we address by bringing in an outside advisor. I spoke up, calmly, for what I think was the first time in 8 months of quietly absorbing his assumptions. I mentioned that I had, in fact, founded and successfully exited a logistics software company operating in almost exactly that space, 2 years earlier, and that I'd be happy to lead that portion of the client presentation directly, given my direct experience. Preston's expression shifted through several stages in the span of about 3 seconds, confusion, quick mental recalculation, and finally something that looked distinctly like professional embarrassment in front of the partners he'd been trying to impress. He asked me to clarify, in front of everyone, exactly what company I meant. I explained it plainly, the same unglamorous facts I'd been sitting on for 8 months, the founding, the funding rounds, the eventual acquisition, the transition period I'd just completed before joining Camden. I didn't mention the specific financial outcome, that felt unnecessary and slightly performative given the room, but the partners in that meeting understood immediately what a successful acquisition in that space generally implied. We got the client. My direct experience, once Preston finally understood it existed, became the centerpiece of our winning pitch. Preston never apologized directly, not in so many words. But his unsolicited career advice about my resume stopped entirely after that meeting, replaced, gradually, by a noticeably more careful, more respectful way of referencing my background in team discussions. I still work at Camden, mostly because I genuinely enjoy the specific strategic work I set out to learn there in the first place. Preston and I have a solid, if slightly more formal, working relationship now, built on an accurate understanding of who he's actually managing, rather than the quick, convenient assumption he made during our first one-on-one. I think about that first meeting sometimes, the ease with which Preston reduced years of genuinely difficult, formative work into a waste of time on your resume, simply because the outcome didn't fit his narrow definition of a traditional career trajectory. It's a reminder I try to hold on to, that the messiest, most uncertain-looking chapters on someone's resume are often exactly where the real substance of their capability was quietly built. If you've ever had someone confidently misjudge your history based on the shape of it rather than the substance, remember this: you don't owe every skeptical manager, colleague, or stranger an immediate correction. Sometimes the truth simply needs the right room, and the right moment, to speak for itself far louder than any explanation you could have offered at the time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Silent Empire. New story every week, subscribe so you never miss one. See you in the next one.